Organizers of yesterday's vigil for the victims of the Nova Scotia shooting. The pandemic may have prevented us from gathering in person, but we still found a way to come together to celebrate the lives of the victims and support their families. It was an extremely moving tribute and was just yet another example of how Canadians are there for each other in difficult times. Once again, my thoughts and the thoughts of all Canadians are with the families and loved ones of the victims. This week, our government announced more targeted support for Canadians who are going through an especially hard time because of COVID-19. With the Canada Emergency Community Support Fund, we're giving more resources to charities and nonprofits so that they can continue their important work. We also unveiled our $9 billion plan to help students and recent grads get through the next few months. Because of COVID-19, there aren't as many jobs for students as last year, and without a job, it can be hard to pay for tuition or the day-to-day basics. So we launched the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, which gives students at least $1,250 a month from May to August. At the same time, we're creating 76,000 jobs for young people in sectors that need an extra hand right now or on the front line of the pandemic. And if students prefer to volunteer and help in the fight against COVID-19, they'll be eligible for a $1,000 to $5,000 grant through the new Canada Student Service Grant. For
small businesses, we announced yesterday that we had reached agreements with all the provinces and territories to lower by 75% their rent for the months of April, May, and June. I also want to take this opportunity to remind employers of all sizes that they can apply starting Monday to receive the emergency wage subsidy. In the meantime, you can go to the site of the Canada Revenue Agency to calculate what the subsidy will cover. Our government is providing help to meet immediate and urgent needs of both workers and businesses. At the same time, we are also thinking of what to expect in the coming months. We are providing more funding to medical research on COVID-19 and the development of a vaccine. This week, we put in place the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force, whose mission will be to trace infection and get a better understanding of how we can become immunized against the virus.
Our objectives as a government have been clear. Help those who need it most. Protect jobs. Support the small businesses that make our communities a better place to call home, and lay the groundwork for our economy to come roaring back once this crisis is over. In the past few weeks, our government introduced a series of measures to do just that, but we know there are more people to help, more work to be done. So today, we're announcing $62.5 million to support fish and seafood processors through this crisis. As we fight COVID-19, people who work in fish and seafood processing plants across the country are playing a crucial role when it comes to getting food to our tables. This funding will help ensure that they can safely continue their important work. We're giving more money to processors so that they can purchase personal protective equipment for workers, adapt to health protocols, and support other social distancing measures. For example, fish processing plants could buy new equipment like freezers or storage space so that their product, food for Canadians, can stay good while they respond to a changing market. With this announcement, we're giving fish and seafood processors more resources to adapt to the many challenges brought on by the pandemic, and above all, keep workers safe. Our fish sector is interconnected, so these investments will also have a positive impact on fish harvesters. On that note, I want to take a moment to recognize the tremendous work that is being done by every person who makes Canada's food system possible, including our food producers and fish harvesters. You keep our grocery stores stocked and our families fed. I know that the past few weeks have been really tough on you too, whether it be financially or emotionally. I want to thank you all for everything you do for us. You're providing an essential service to the country. We know that you have specific needs and asks right now, and we are actively exploring additional ways to support you as we move forward.
Today, we are announcing an investment of $62.5 million to support fish and seafood processors in this crisis. People working in that area feed our families every day. We are investing to allow them to continue their important work in safety. This is money that processors will be able to use to buy personal protective equipment for their workers, adapt their health protocols, and support other measures such as social distancing. Fish processing plants will be able to use this money to buy refrigerators or storage space to store their products in order to sell them later. Thanks to today's announcement, fish and seafood processors will have the necessary resources to face the challenges of this pandemic and protect the health of their workers. Because our seafood processing sectors are closely tied, these investments will also be able to help fishers. And in fact, I want to take a moment to talk about the incredible work being done by all people who work in the food processing industry. You fill the shelves of our grocery stores with fresh products, and I know that the recent weeks have been very difficult for you, financially or emotionally. So thank you for everything you're doing for us. We know that you have special demands and needs, and we will continue to look at different ways of helping you. As I mentioned yesterday, I had a discussion with the premiers of the provinces and territories, and we talked about gradually reopening the economy. We are working with the public health officers to set out the principles and standards that will serve us all. The economy and the realities of each province are unique, so the timing and specific measures will be different from one province to another. That said, there is an important coordination work that must be done at the national level to avoid confusion. We are now establishing a plan based on science, data, and experts' advice that reflects our common ambition to lift this country out of this crisis. The next phase will be crucial. If we do not introduce the right measures, we could lose all the progress we've made thus far. Our discussions are continuing, and we will continue to work together to ensure the safety of all Canadians.
Yesterday, I had a call with the First Ministers, and we talked about putting together a joint statement outlining what needs to be done to reopen the economy. We're working together with Canada's chief medical officers to establish principles and guidelines for us all. We have to be mindful that the economy and the realities of each province and territory are unique, so the timing and specific measures will be different across jurisdictions. But we need a coordinated approach nationally to avoid any confusion amongst Canadians. We're working together on a plan based on science, data, and expert advice that lays out our common ambition to see our country through this. If we don't get the next phase right, we risk losing all the progress we've made so far. These conversations are ongoing, and we will keep working together for all Canadians. Tomorrow, there won't be any press conferences either by doctors or myself, so I want to close this morning to talking directly to young Canadians, as I do every weekend. To all the kids watching out there, you're doing great. Keep helping out around the house. Try to keep up with your schoolwork, and above all, stay positive. This is a tough time, but we're going to get through this together. And to young people out there, many of you are students who need extra help, and we're here for you. This week, we announced a series of measures to support you during this crisis. But we need your help, too. This is a moment in our country's history that we will look back on and ask each of ourselves what we did for our community, for our country. What did we do to serve our country, to help the world? And as you look at what you can do this summer, please remember that there are seniors who need your help. There are frontline workers, including in our medical professions, who could use a helping hand. And there are agricultural farmers and producers who'd love to see you step up to help feed Canadians. Look at how you can use your energy, your drive, your vision for making the world a better place, and make it so. How we get through this as a country depends on each of us, the choices we make, the actions we take. So this weekend, stay home. Keep washing your hands. And if you need to go out for groceries, keep at least 2 meters apart from each other. And think about what you can do in the fight against COVID-19 to support our frontline workers, to help your community. I know that we will help each other to get through this, because that's just who we are as Canadians. Merci beaucoup. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Yesterday, your remarks about helping out in seniors' homes. Now, we haven't seen the federal support working that well in Ontario and Quebec. And in fact, we've heard people saying that this sector has been underfinanced for years. Will you increase health transfers to avoid this situation recurring during the second or third waves of COVID-19? Thank you, Mélanie. Well, first of all, I've always been very clear that I have no intention of interfering in provincial areas of jurisdiction. However, people are asking real questions right across the country about how we support our seniors, about how we look after our most vulnerable Canadians. And I think these are questions we have to look at seriously. But in the months and the years to come, after we've come through this pandemic and this crisis, we have a responsibility to reflect on how we can do things better, to help those who built this country, help them during the last years of their lives. So, of course, we will have discussions on health transfers. We've already transferred $500 million in direct funding to the provinces for their health system. And we will also be looking at how we can work together as a country to ensure that the current system is adequate to help all Canadians.
I've been very clear that I have no intention of seeing the federal government take over or get involved in provincial areas of jurisdiction. But I think Canadians are asking themselves very, very important questions right across the country about how we care for our elders, how we support the most vulnerable in society. We have to answer those questions. We have to work very hard to come up with better answers than we've had until this point. And that, yes, means talking about transfers to the provinces. We sent $500 million in a health transfer to the provinces at the beginning of this crisis. But there is always more to do. So over the coming weeks, months, years, including beyond this COVID crisis, we need to do a better job supporting our elders, supporting those who built this country. And that's what we're going to do.
Follow up, Mélanie? Yes, thank you. With respect to the student benefit, in Quebec, they're not terribly happy about that because they already have a program in place. Did you discuss this with Premier Legault, and would you be prepared to make adjustments to your program and the bill you will be introducing? Our students need support now. Summer jobs on which they were counting have pretty much disappeared, and they're looking at ways to be able to pay their groceries and rent. I know that young people right across the country want to help and that they want to be there to help. But we also have to be there for them. And that's why direct support for students in these difficult times is not only for them, it's for their future. And we need to ensure that our students can receive the necessary support this summer and opportunities to gain work experience that will be helpful in the rest of their career. But we also need to ensure that they can fund their studies once we're in September. So we're very pleased to work with other parties and with the provinces to enhance the aid being provided in different areas, including students, and we will work with them.
Question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Catherine Lévesque, La Presse. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Just to come back to the long-term care homes, when you say that you are prepared to bring those facilities back into the federal jurisdiction, were you serious? No, I have no intention of interfering in provincial areas of jurisdiction. But of course, we will be having discussions with the provinces as to how we can help to rectify the situation in the short term and also provide adequate funding for our systems across the country. But the federal government has no intention of interfering in provincial responsibilities. Follow up? At the same time, you said you will have to have this discussion and that maybe it could be brought under the Canada Health Act. But what I'd like to know is, after your discussion yesterday with the provinces, what did you agree on concretely in terms of reopening the economy? And were you not a little slow in establishing these guidelines since the provinces are already starting to reopen their economies? Well, we have been talking to the provinces and we have agreed to base the recommendations and guidelines on science and experts' advice, as well as increased testing and contact tracing. So we basically agree on the principles and approaches and practices that are necessary. But at every step, we also realize that the provinces and territories will be taking different approaches. So we wanted to create a system or a set of guidelines that the provinces could support so that all Canadians across the country will see that we are introducing measures that are focused on science and a common approach across the country to keep everyone safe and allow the economy to gradually reopen while being vigilant.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Justin Ling, freelance. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I want to ask you about a report that came out yesterday from the correctional investigator. He wrote that prisons across the country facing COVID-19 were throwing inmates who were symptomatic or were tested positive for COVID-19 in what they were calling medical isolation, but what he describes basically as solitary confinement, and said basically it was not justifiable or tolerable. I'm wondering if you're comfortable with federal prisons throwing inmates in what is essentially solitary confinement in the midst of a pandemic.
We have taken a number of strong measures in corrections facilities to protect inmates and staff members from the spread of COVID-19. I am aware of the report put out yesterday, and we are following up on the details.
Follow up, Justin?
Yeah, frankly, Prime Minister, it's been frustrating asking you about this. Your public safety minister is, of course, the one responsible for Canada's prisons, but he hasn't really been seen in the past month, aside from a brief press conference on a different matter. Where is Public Safety Minister Bill Blair?
Minister Blair is working extremely hard on keeping Canadians safe, whether it is dealing with the Nova Scotia tragedy, as you all know, or working with the Border Services Agency to make sure that our border measures are strong in place. He's been working with provinces on preparation for floods and forest fires as they come up this season. He's also continuing to work on the strong gun control measures that we've had to do. We have been incredibly fortunate to have Minister Blair work on the corrections file as well as all the other files that keep Canadians safe, and I'm very proud to have him by my side.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Teresa Wright, Canadian Press. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. The World Health Organization has issued a statement saying there's no evidence people who recover from COVID-19 are protected from a second infection. And that was in response to countries discussing the possibility of issuing immunity passports to people who have recovered. How wise is it to be discussing plans to lift restrictions with provinces if it's possible that people could get sick more than once from COVID-19?
In the approach that we're taking very carefully around the provinces and across the country on looking at reopening, I don't believe that there are any of the plans that hinge on certain people or individuals being immune or having immune to COVID-19. The focus we have is on continuing to prevent spread through social distancing measures, through PPE in workplaces, through various measures of protecting Canadians as we move forward. There is still an awful lot of science being done on the idea of immunity on protections, which is why we've invested significant amounts of money in a new Canada immunity task force that will be examining these issues. But it is very clear that the science is not decided on whether or not having had COVID once prevents you from getting it again. We know it is something that we need to get clearer answers to, and until we have those clear answers, we need to assume that and err on the side of more caution. Okay.
There is no scientific evidence at this time that if you have caught COVID-19 once, you are protected from catching it again. So all the plans being established by the provinces are based on protecting Canadians and preventing further spread of COVID-19, and not as immunity as something that can be considered in the coming months. There's still a great deal of work to be done on that, and that's why we are investing in a task force, an immunity task force in Canada with extraordinary experts and scientists to expand our knowledge of this disease.
Teresa?
What lessons do you take for Canada from the disunity that we're seeing in the COVID-19 response in the United States? And what worries do you have about how we might ultimately be affected?
I think, first of all, Canadians can, take great comfort in the fact that all of our orders of government have been working together in a very strong and aligned way. That we have, as a country, focused on listening to experts and scientists as we move forward, as we make decisions on how to keep Canadians safe. We have seen extraordinary medical health professionals and public health officials across the country sharing with citizens in their provinces how they can keep safe. And we have a great team at the national level that is helping coordinate and inform the decisions taken across the country. As we move forward with a framework and guidelines that will impact on the direct decisions taken by the provinces that the provinces themselves are working with us to generate, we've seen that this unity that Canada has, despite tremendous variance in impact of the virus, in nature of the economies and the kind of situations people live in, has been deeply reassuring to Canadians, and we will continue focusing on that. And as part of the way forward, we will continue to make sure that Canada and Canadians are protected from external sources of the virus, whether that's keeping up international border measures or moving forward on specific measures around quarantine for anyone who arrives in this country. These are the things that we're going to continue to do.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Il y a beaucoup de gens dans la communauté.
There are a lot of people in the business community who are concerned that there isn't enough individual PPE because the provinces are starting to reopen. The businesses will do so as well. Are you not concerned that there will be enough equipment available? Do you think our in domestic production and what's coming in are enough? Well, one of the criteria about reopening the the economy and businesses will be the availability of individual protective equipment so that people can work safely. And we know that the demand will continue to increase across the country. We will be moving forward gradually because, of course, we must have enough equipment for the provinces to protect workers, not just healthcare workers. So that's why, both in terms of our domestic production and our imports from other countries, we are increasing our capacity significantly. But of course, as long as we don't have enough PPE, we will not be reopening certain industries. Do you think that the current supplies are enough now that the provinces have talked about their plans? And what about people working in salons? Will they have to wear masks? Well, I don't think we should be reopening any sector of the economy until we have enough material to protect Canadians and ensure that we are stopping the spread of COVID-19.
I don't think we should be talking about reopening any parts of the economy if we do not have a strong plan to protect people working there and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Prime Minister, Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. Yesterday, Doug Ford appealed to you directly in his press conference saying, if you're listening, they need help. In your call last night, what specific offers did you give to Ontario when it comes to the long-term care home crisis that they're facing right now?
We've put forward measures that have allocated billions of dollars to go to the provinces to support on top-ups for essential workers, particularly in long-term care facilities, and we look to have more announcements on that soon. But we've also responded to very direct requests by the provinces to send in military support. Obviously, that can't be more than a short-term answer, but we will be there to help Canadians who are going through extraordinarily difficult times. The situation in our long-term care facilities in different parts of this country is absolutely unacceptable, and all of us as Canadians need to do whatever we can to support our elders. Okay. The
situation in seniors' homes and long-term care facilities is unacceptable. And as Canadians, we must be there for each other. And we have offered money to the provinces to provide wage top-ups to workers in that sector. And we have given positive responses to requests for the military to go in to help control the situation. So we will be there to help as much as possible, because that is what Canadians expect.
In your answer just now to my colleague, you said that Canada won't reopen its economy if we don't have enough PPE and enough masks, but we know right now that we don't have that. We just had to return some masks that came from China because they are not up to standards. We also know that there is this crisis that's going on in long-term care homes. Is it too early to even have these conversations about reopening the economy when there are still so many issues that we're dealing with right now?
I think there are really important conversations to be had in advance of opening up our economies. As we say, we have to be very, very careful and very gradual about it and ensure that we have the measures in place to control and prevent any further spread of COVID-19. Adequate PPE supplies will be a part of that, but I can assure you that we are very much on that, whether it's the plane loads of PPE supplies that will be coming in almost every single day next week, or the domestic production capacity, which is ramping up rapidly and will be ready to support Canadians as we move forward on steps towards reopening. These are the things that we need to make sure we're getting right, so as to ensure that all the sacrifices we've made over the past weeks won't be for nothing. Okay. We
know that we have to take a gradual and progressive approach and be very careful about reopening the economy in terms of the economy as a whole or certain economic sectors. And therefore, we need to have measures in place to protect workers and prevent the spread of COVID-19. And that's precisely why we will continue continue to receive more and more PPE. We will be receiving plane loads full of equipment in the coming days and weeks, and we will also be looking forward to domestic production of those goods that will be online very soon. All of that will be important as part of our plan to reopen the economy gradually.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. You said that the science hasn't decided yet on whether or not someone can become immune to COVID-19 if they already have caught it. You said Canada's studying this, but what other concerns do you have about immunity passports or certificates that might be needed down the line to prove that you are immune to COVID-19 at mass gatherings or sporting events, even to attend work when the economy eventually does reopen?
I think any such discussions or decisions need to be based on very strong and very clear scientific evidence, and that's why our scientists are looking very, very carefully, as are people around the world, at what kind of immunity the presence of antibodies could deliver to Canadians, to people who've already been affected, and what impacts that has. We're not there yet on being able to make a pronouncement on that, so all the other elements are not discussions to be had now.
The European Union is planning a major funding event for the World Health Organization at the beginning of May. Will Canada be part of that event? And would you consider attaching some sort of conditions to that funding, like a review of the WHO's handling of this pandemic?
Canada will always be there to support science and the work done internationally on keeping our planet and our citizens safe. This is something that we are looking to participate in. I think, like many countries, there are questions around how to ensure that we learn from this situation and we get better at dealing with these things with a level of transparency and rigor that I think citizens expect.
Hi, Prime Minister. Crystal Logue with Global News. Can you speak a bit more about what the federal government responsibility on rulemaking falls when it comes to reopening the economy, and where it will be up to the provincial government so far as responsibility in rulemaking and on the reopenings of the economy?
Our Constitution lays out very clear areas of federal, of provincial, of municipal, by extension, responsibilities. And of course, the provinces will have a lead role in determining how their economies will reopen. But that's why we've been working with the provinces, who are very varied in their realities, in what they are being challenged with, to establish a base level of criteria, a checklist, a set of guidelines that will ensure that right across the country, the decisions being made by each province will be based around a shared understanding of the science and the steps necessary towards reopening. But of course, every province has its responsibility and its decisions to make on how it reopens.
And I understand that some premiers last night indicated that a renewed infrastructure program will be vital to restarting the economy. With construction season upon us, can you tell us about the federal plans in this regard, and whether or not the federal government will allow municipalities in particular to contribute a small percentage of cost to any municipality project?
We understand the importance of getting our economy going again as quickly as possible, but that as quickly as possible depends very much on ensuring that we are arresting the spread of COVID-19 and in an ability to prevent further spread. That is why, yes, we are in discussions with the provinces around infrastructure investments to benefit from this construction season, but we need to make sure we're doing that safely and responsibly. And that is also part of the conversations we're having with the provinces.
We recognize that the economic recovery can include the construction season, but we must ensure that we do things in such a way as not to make workers vulnerable or end up further spreading this virus. So we are currently in discussions with the provinces about infrastructure measures that could help. But the concern of every province is primarily the protection of the citizens of their province. Thank you very much, everyone.